A shocking moment on live television left the entire nation stunned. A bold and offensive insult, "Go back to Africa," was hurled during a heated exchange, sparking instant outrage. But what happened next? No one saw coming. Instead of fury, a response so powerful, so unexpected, flipped the entire situation on its head and silenced millions. What was said? Why is America still talking about it? Stay tuned. A controversial racial insult was made during a recent political exchange, bringing attention to the deep roots of racism in American society. The phrase "go back to Africa" was used in a public setting, sparking immediate outrage and concern. This insult is not new. It has a long, painful history tied to the struggle of Black Americans for equality and dignity. The use of such language shows that even today, certain harmful ideas about race and belonging still exist in public conversations, especially within political spaces, where respectful communication is expected. The phrase itself is built on the false belief that Black Americans are not truly part of the United States, even though their ancestors have been here for hundreds of years. It suggests that someone's skin color or background makes them less American. This idea is not only incorrect but deeply offensive. African Americans have been part of the country since before it was even called the United States. Many of them are descendants of enslaved people who were forcibly brought to America, made to work without pay, and denied basic human rights. Their labor built much of the country's economy and infrastructure, especially in the early days. To tell a Black person to go back to Africa is to ignore all of that history and to treat them as outsiders in their own home. This kind of insult is also designed to hurt and silence. It does not come from a place of honest disagreement. It comes from a place of hate and disrespect. When it is used in politics, it becomes even more dangerous. People look up to political figures. They are expected to speak with care, especially when addressing someone who represents a different group of people. When they use racist language, they are sending a message to everyone watching. That message is, racism is acceptable, and it is okay to attack someone based on their race. This can make others feel unsafe or unwelcome, especially young people of color who are still forming their ideas about where they belong in society. Another serious issue with this insult is how it tries to erase someone's contributions and achievements. The person who was insulted is not just an ordinary person walking down the street. They are someone who has worked hard to earn a role in public service, likely through years of dedication, education, and public support. Telling them to go back anywhere ignores all the work they've done and the voice they have earned. It reduces their identity to just the color of their skin, rather than the content of their character or the value they bring to their country. This moment also shows how racism is not always hidden or subtle. Sometimes it is loud and direct. When someone says something this hurtful in a public space, it reminds us that bigotry can still show up without warning, and when it does, it must be addressed directly. Education plays a key role in helping people understand why this phrase is wrong. It's not just about political correctness, it's about human dignity and respect. Schools, community groups, and families must all play a role in teaching why words matter and how they can harm or heal. Some people might try to defend this kind of speech by saying it's just an opinion or freedom of speech. But freedom of speech does not mean freedom from consequences. In a diverse country like the United States, using speech to harm others based on their background should never be accepted as normal. Political debate is healthy, and people are allowed to disagree. But there is a line between disagreement and dehumanization. The insult "go back to Africa" crosses that line. It brings up old wounds and tries to push people out of the national conversation simply because of who they are. This event is a reminder that racism still exists, not just in private conversations, but sometimes in the words of those in powerful positions. It shows why there is still a need for strong discussions about race identity and what it means to be American. It also reveals the importance of leaders who are willing to speak up against hate, even when it is uncomfortable. When racist language is used so openly, it must be met with truth, education, and a clear message that such speech has no place in the society we want to build. The comment in question was not directed at a random person or a private citizen. It was aimed at a public figure who holds a respected position within the political system. This individual is known for representing the interests of their community, serving in an official role that carries responsibilities related to lawmaking, public service, and national discourse. The fact that such a harmful insult was directed at someone in this kind of role makes the situation even more serious. In democratic societies, public figures are often expected to be treated with a basic level of respect, especially during political conversations or debates. When an insult of this nature is used against someone in such a position, it sends a message not only to that individual but to every community they represent. A public figure, especially one from a minority background, often carries more than just their own identity. They also carry the hopes, voices, and struggles of the people who put them in office. When racial insults are directed at them, it is not just an attack on one person, but an attack on an entire group of citizens who see that person as a reflection of their experience. The insult, therefore, becomes broader in meaning and consequence. It challenges the idea of equal representation and inclusion in political spaces. When someone in a government role is told to go back to Africa, it implies that people of African descent do not belong in positions of power, which is both untrue and harmful. This individual has likely worked hard to earn their role, going through education, community service, public debates, and elections. The path to holding a public office is rarely easy, especially for people of color who must often deal with added scrutiny, bias, and barriers. For someone to use a racial insult against them, especially during a public or professional moment, disregards all of the achievements and struggles that led to that point. It tries to reduce a leader to just their skin color and not their ideas, goals, or record. It is a form of erasure, removing someone's accomplishments and replacing them with hate. Public figures are also symbols. When they are attacked, people are watching. Children, students, voters, and members of underrepresented communities take notice. If a racial insult can be used against someone in office, then it can happen to anyone, anywhere. That is why these moments are so powerful. They show the reality of racism not just on the streets or in private messages, but in official, public-facing institutions. The idea that someone who is elected to serve can still face such language reminds everyone that the fight for equality is not over. It is also important to understand that such insults are often used to intimidate or silence. When someone uses language like "go back to Africa," they are not just expressing an opinion, they are attempting to remove someone from the conversation altogether. This tactic has been used for decades, often in response to strong, intelligent, and confident voices from minority communities. The goal is to make the person feel like they don't belong, or that their views don't count. But history has shown that this tactic rarely works in the long term. Many public figures who face this kind of hatred use it as fuel to continue, speaking out and standing strong. In educational settings, this situation can be used to teach the importance of representation. Representation means having leaders who reflect the diverse population of the country. It means showing young people that they too can aim for leadership roles, regardless of their background. When someone in such a position faces racism, the lesson should not be one of fear but one of strength. It can help others understand what public figures go through and why their work matters even more in the face of disrespect or hate. In this particular case, the insult was made publicly, possibly during a media appearance or political discussion. This means it reached a wide audience. The person who was targeted had no choice but to face the insult in front of millions. This adds pressure, but it also creates an opportunity. Many viewers were likely shocked not just by the words that were said, but by the fact that they were said to someone who holds a high office. It revealed how racism does not stop at the door of public power. It can even try to enter spaces where leadership, dignity, and professionalism are expected. Moments like this one are reminders that respect in politics should not be optional. When an elected figure is insulted with racial language, it shows that racism is still being used as a political weapon, but it also gives people a chance to examine what kind of politics they want to support. Do they want leaders who tear others down based on race? Or do they want leaders who rise above hate and speak for justice, equality, and unity? The insult, though hurtful, opened the door for a larger, more honest national conversation about what kind of behavior is acceptable and what kind is not, especially when aimed at those who serve the public. The person who made the offensive comment is not just a private citizen with no public responsibilities. This individual holds or has held a role connected to politics, either directly or through a visible position in media or government-related spaces. This makes the situation even more serious because words from such a person carry more weight and reach a wider audience. When someone connected to politics uses hateful or racist language, it reflects not only on their own personal views, but also affects how people see the political environment as a whole. People in or around political power are expected to act with responsibility. They are seen as representatives of values, ideas, and even entire political parties. Their speech, especially when it's public, is heard by thousands, sometimes millions, of people. That means their words can influence opinions, affect public behavior, and even shape future political debates. When someone in this kind of role uses a phrase like, "go back to Africa," it introduces dangerous ideas into public conversation. It suggests that racism can be part of political talk. This is deeply harmful to democracy, which depends on respectful discussion between people with different beliefs and backgrounds. In politics, there is often strong disagreement. That is, normal and even healthy. But there are clear lines that should not be crossed. Attacking someone based on race is not a debate. It is discrimination. It shifts the focus away from policies, laws, and solutions and instead brings hatred into the discussion. When a political figure or someone related to the political system uses such speech, it can open the door for others to do the same. It lowers the standards of communication and creates a toxic environment where racism is treated as just another opinion, instead of the dangerous behavior it really is. There is also a long history of people in positions of political influence using race as a way to gain attention or control public conversation. Sometimes these statements are not just said out of emotion, but are planned to stir up anger, division, or fear. These tactics have been used in the past to distract from real issues or to rally certain groups of supporters. But using racism in this way does lasting damage. It hurts individuals, spreads misinformation, and teaches the public that hateful speech is acceptable when it comes from someone in power. What makes this situation especially troubling is the timing and setting of the remark. The statement was not made in a private message or an offhand comment. It was shared in a way that people could hear and react to, possibly through social media, interviews, or live television. The person saying it likely knew that their words would get attention, and yet chose to say them anyway. This shows either a deep lack of understanding about the harm caused by racism, or worse, a clear choice to use racism as a tool. When people connected to politics act in this way, they also create division in society. Some people might try to excuse the words or claim they were just a joke or taken out of context. But many others feel pain, fear, or anger because the words remind them of the racism they have faced in their own lives. These moments widen the gap between communities instead of bringing people together. They make it harder for people to trust political systems or believe in equal treatment under the law. It is also important to understand the long-term effects of such actions. When someone in a political role speaks with hate, it doesn't just stay in the moment. It is remembered. It becomes part of how people view the political space. Young people hear it and learn from it, either that this behavior is okay or that they must be silent when it happens. Both outcomes are dangerous. Political leaders and public voices should be setting a better example, especially in times when racial tensions and inequality are already present in society. This situation shows how important it is to hold people in public roles to a high standard. Their words can unite or divide. They can inspire respect or trigger hate. Choosing to insult someone based on race, especially in a political setting, does not reflect strength or leadership. It reflects weakness in character and a failure to understand the true responsibilities that come with influence. When those connected to politics use their platforms to spread hate, they fail the people they are supposed to serve. They turn a space meant for public service into a stage for personal attacks, And in doing so, they damaged the trust that democracy depends on. The person who was insulted responded in a way that surprised many people. Instead of reacting with anger or frustration, the reply was calm, strong, and filled with meaning. It was not just a personal comeback, but a message for the whole country to hear. This kind of response is rare in situations where someone faces such a direct and painful insult. Most would expect an emotional reaction, especially when the insult carries deep racial meaning. But in this case, the answer went far beyond what people expected. It became a moment of teaching, reflection, and strength. The response did not attack the person who made the insult. It did not use more harsh words or show any hate in return. Instead, it focused on truth. The person who had been targeted reminded everyone listening about history, about how African Americans are not outsiders in this country, but deeply rooted in its foundation. The reply explained how their ancestors were brought to this land against their will, how they suffered through slavery, and how they still rose to build lives, families, and communities. These facts were shared not in a harsh tone, but in a way that invited others to think and understand. The reply turned a racist comment into an educational moment. It showed that strength does not always come from shouting back, but from standing tall and speaking truth with clarity. Many people who heard the response felt moved. It reminded them of the courage needed to face racism without becoming bitter or defeated. The words used were not only meant to defend personal dignity, but also to protect the dignity of all those who have faced similar hate. In a way, the person who was insulted took the hate thrown at them and transformed it into a lesson for the nation. This moment also highlighted what true leadership looks like. A real leader does not respond to hate with more hate. Instead, they use difficult moments to show character, patience, and wisdom. In this case, the response was not about gaining attention or winning an argument. It was about standing for something bigger than oneself. It was about showing that even in the face of open racism, one can choose to stay composed and speak with purpose. That decision to answer hate with calm truth had a strong impact on people watching, especially those who may have faced similar words in their own lives. Many Americans who saw or heard the response said they felt proud. They saw someone take control of a painful moment and turn it into something powerful. The reply became a message for people of all ages, that you don't have to lose yourself when someone tries to bring you down. You can stay true to who you are and even teach others in the process. That kind of response takes emotional strength and a deep understanding of one's own value. It showed the nation what dignity under pressure looks like. The response also reminded people that racism, while still present, does not have the final word. A person who is insulted because of their background has the choice to either let it break them or use it as fuel to rise higher. In this case, the choice was clear. The insult was met with words that lifted the conversation, rather than staying at the level of hate. The person raised the discussion to a place of history, identity, and national truth. That shift changed the entire meaning of the moment. What started as a cruel remark ended as a lesson in pride, resilience, and humanity. This event became widely discussed, not just because of the insult, but because of the response. It challenged others to think about how they would react in a similar situation. It also showed that silence or shouting are not the only options. There is power in speaking with knowledge and with calm. That kind of response can silence hate more effectively than any loud comeback. It forces people to listen and consider what they might not have thought about before. For students, educators, and future leaders, the way the insult was handled became a real-life example of what it means to respond with purpose. The words spoken after the insult made it clear that being a target of hate does not mean being weak. In fact, how one answers hate can become a source of inspiration and strength for many others. This moment, unexpected as it was, gave the country a clear image of how truth, grace, and courage can stand firm even in the face of cruelty. The response to the insult did not just silence the hateful remark, it became a powerful moment that moved people across the country. What started as a racist comment meant to hurt and divide ended up becoming a turning point that sparked national reflection. Many people from different backgrounds began to talk about what had happened. They weren't just discussing the insult, They were focusing on the way it was answered. It showed that words have power not only to hurt, but also to heal, guide, and even inspire change. Across social media platforms, news channels, and community discussions, the conversation quickly shifted from shock to admiration. The strength and clarity of the reply caught the attention of millions. People who may have once felt voiceless saw an example of someone who refused to let hate define the moment. The message was loud and clear. No matter how ugly racism appears, it can be met with dignity, truth, and resilience. That kind of public example can stay in the hearts and minds of people long after the moment itself has passed. The response also encouraged many others to speak up about their own experiences with racism. It gave them a space to share their stories and feelings. In schools, workplaces, and homes, people started talking more openly about what racism looks like and how it affects real lives. This kind of public awareness is important. When a single event causes people to think more deeply about justice, fairness, and respect, it shows that progress is possible. The moment became more than just a headline. It became a spark for education and unity. Leaders, educators, and community organizers also used the response as a teaching tool. They pointed to it as an example of how to handle hate in a way that brings people together, rather than pushing them apart. It showed that one does not have to shout back to make a strong point. By staying composed and choosing words carefully, the reply reached far more people than a heated argument ever could. That kind of response takes strength, self-control, and wisdom, qualities that are often missing in public discussions but are deeply needed. Young people in particular paid attention. For them, the moment was a lesson in how to face injustice without losing control or confidence. They saw that you can defend yourself and your identity without lowering your standards or using the same kind of harmful speech. It taught them that even when someone tries to tear you down with hateful words, you can rise above it, and in doing so, set an example for others. This can have a long-lasting effect on how the next generation handles issues of race, respect, and public conversation. The national reaction also revealed something powerful about public opinion. While the insult was meant to harm, the response showed that most people reject that kind of hate. Americans from different political views and walks of life expressed support for the person who was targeted. They made it clear that racism, especially when used so openly, is not something they will accept. This kind of widespread support matters. It sends a message that hate speech, even when said by people in or around power, will not go unchallenged. The conversation that followed helped bring attention to how racism still exists in public spaces and how it often goes unpunished. People began to ask harder questions. Why do these kinds of insults still happen in 2025? What does this say about the culture of politics and media? What can be done to prevent it in the future? These are the kinds of questions that lead to real social change. They push schools, lawmakers, and everyday citizens to reflect and act. This moment also reminded people that standing up to racism is not just the job of the person who is targeted. It is everyone's responsibility. When someone responds to hate with strength and wisdom, they open the door for others to follow. And when people across the country recognize that strength and speak up in support, it builds a culture where racism has less room to grow. What made the moment so powerful was not just the reply, but what it caused afterward. It showed the country that even painful moments can be used to create something better. It proved that hate can be answered with hope, and division can be met with unity. The national response was more than just support for one person. It was a reflection of the values many people still believe in: equality, respect, and the belief that every voice, no matter where it comes from, deserves to be heard with fairness and humanity.